Hi everyone, welcome to part 2 of my reaction to this Shaun geezer's attempt to discredit J.K. Rowling by discrediting people she is supposedly friends with. I say supposedly because Shaun's next target is the indefatigable Posie Parker, or Kellie-Jay Keen as I prefer to call her because that's her real name. And I'm not aware that she has any kind of friendship with J.K. Rowling. I know Kellie-Jay is a huge supporter of J.K. and has produced I Love JKR merchandise, but it's a bit of a stretch to call them friends. He does briefly have a go at a number of other brilliant women in his video, and I'd say at least one of them has grounds to sue him, but I'm not going to go there. I'm sticking with Kellie-Jay for reasons. In his video, Shaun shows himself to be the kind of man who won't let the truth get in the way of his nefarious purpose of trying to bring down women who challenge the men's rights activists of the gender cult, and to do so he employs the pernicious, desperate and inordinately dishonest strategy of trying to link them to the far right, to racism, to bigotry in one way or another. I'm sure they're all used to it, as I am myself, which is why I'm surprised to see some of those women do the same to Kellie-Jay. I don't need to defend Kellie-Jay Keen. She's was going to say big enough, but just like Magdalene, Kellie-Jay is physically a tiny woman, but so far she has proven mentally and emotionally strong enough to roll with the punches and to flip you off as she becomes ever more popular. At the moment she has well over 60,000 subscribers on YouTube, which is fantastic for a channel that is fighting the gender cult. She's a law unto herself, and that is what I admire most about her. There are things on which I disagree with Kellie-Jay, as there are with probably everybody else I know, but mostly when it comes to this topic of transgenderism, we are pretty much aligned, and she has done so much to galvanise opposition and to inspire and give confidence to ordinary women. That is why I want to defend her, even though I don't need to, and particularly this week when she has yet again and very unfairly had to cop more flack from women on the same side of this conflict, and I'm going to talk about that briefly now. Kellie-Jay has been touring the US and holding public open mic events in lots of different US cities, and the scum, which as you know is the collective noun for trans activist bullies, have of course turned up and behaved even worse than they do here. There has been violence. One of many big differences between the US and here is how easy it seems to be to get a gun over there, and given how insane the cultists appear to be, Kellie-Jay and everyone who turns up to stand alongside her and to speak out has to be extraordinarily brave. She cancelled events planned for Portland and Seattle in fear of her life. One of the allegations made about her is that after the violence of Tacoma, she hired a gang of right-wing thugs or militia as security for the next event, which was in Austin, Texas.
They're also alleging that the security provided in Austin was somehow right-wing affiliated. Like, it's super disappointing to see feminists buying into these conspiracies that we normally see from, like, TRAs.
In fact, it was someone called Michelle Evans, who is standing as the Republican candidate for Texas State Representative, who hired professional security officers. Apparently the head of the firm is a conservative. So what? I'm pretty disgusted to see the lengths certain individuals went to try and prove these guys were 3%ers, which even most Americans don't seem to have heard of. I'll leave you to look them up. Most Americans who commented publicly expressed relief that she had got security of some kind. A few days ago, things kicked off after this selfie taken by some man who turned up to her event in Chicago. Obviously, Kellie-Jay is at fault here for not asking for his CV, his resume, before allowing him to take a selfie with her, because it turns out that this bloke is a former president of a chapter of the Proud Boys. Apparently any event where the so-called left or Antifa or whatever they call themselves turn up is a magnet for the Proud Boys, but it seems like this guy was on his own. Somebody tweeted a message from him, and it turns out, perhaps unsurprisingly, that he is semi-literate. You'll have to pause if you want to read the whole of his message. I'll link to the tweet below, but I don't know how long it will be there. The most important thing he says is that the lady I just found out they call KJK didn't know me at all since I was just a stranger asking for a selfie, and it's wrong that many want to affiliate her for taking a selfie with a random dude. I'm going to show a clip of a man who was at the event and witnessed the selfie being taken. His name is Ryan Pennington, and I will link to both the short videos he made about the Chicago event below.
I was there from the time Kellie-Jay showed up to when she left. So she's like immediately swarmed by a bunch of lunatics, okay? And then as she's on her way out, like she's packing her stuff up, you know, like waiting for police to usher everybody out, some dude walks up, taps her on the shoulder, just they take a picture. It's a 2-second interaction. Okay, that's like on her way out. And then immediately after that, as she's walking away, I want to say it was 2 younger women approach her with their phone and very conspicuously had this guy's picture and all his info pulled up, ready to go to berate her. And Kellie-Jay's just kind of looking at him like, what are you talking about? So, you know, I don't know why people are so determined to make her out to be some kind of like white nationalist or whatever.
Well, we know why the gender cult do it. They are terrified of her and of the power of her words, as they are of all of us whom they haven't managed to intimidate into shutting up. So they resort to despicable and ironic smears because, let's be honest, who are the people who behave like vicious fascist thugs whenever women meet to speak? It isn't us. Why women on our own side are doing it, I have no idea. 2 things I want to say. The first is that I don't think those feminists who promote falsehoods about Kellie-Jay are deliberately lying. I think they honestly believe what they say, and they are guilty of a lack of skepticism of what they see and hear about her. That has been shown with this Proud Boy bloke. They should call themselves the Proud Blokes. It would be easier for me to get my head round. Where she was accused of cozying up to him and of knowing who he was when she did so. Her feminist detractors are now in confirmation bias mode, in which anything that seems to confirm what they already want to believe is accepted and promoted without question. The second thing is that I don't buy into this narrative that they are jealous of her. These are brilliant, highly accomplished women who've done so much for women, and I admire and applaud them for that, as does Kellie-Jay herself, even though they seem intent on trying to hurt her and throw her under a tank. To those women, I would say, please leave her alone. Of course you're free to distance yourself from her, but you should try harder to check the information you get about her before passing it on, and this week you've crossed the line. So many people have pointed out that by trying to associate her with the far right, you have put her and the other women at her events at greater risk than they already were. None of these people actually know Kellie-Jay. I do, not well, but I've met her many times and I've watched most of her hundreds of videos, and I understand where she's at and where she's coming from, and it's a good place. She does not promote far-right policies on anything. If she's going to be lumped in with the far right because of her populist strategy, then we all are, and that's ridiculous. Okay, that's all I'm going to say about the events of this past week. So if that's what you came here for, I won't be hurt if you say goodbye, but please hit like before you go. Now I'm going to resume normal service and the video I was planning to do anyway, although I changed it a bit, and react to that horrible man called Shaun and what he said about her in about Kellie-Jay in his attempt to discredit J.K. Rowling. Here we go.
So Parker, also known as Kellie-Jay Minchell, is someone who thinks that, quote, women who call themselves men should be sterilised. So that's the sort of person she is.
Oh no, I'm not defending her on that one. Bloody hell. How pathetic that Shaun starts by going back 4.5 years to a very intemperate tweet she did and which she withdrew within a day. I remember seeing this conversation happen in real time on Twitter and thinking, oh, for crying out loud, Kellie-Jay. I knew she was feeling upset at the time and with good reason, and I knew what she meant, which was simply that women who claim they're not really women and wish they were men and inject testosterone and grow beards and want to be registered as their child's father, like Freddie McConnell tried and thankfully failed to do, shouldn't have children. Instinctively, I agree with Kellie-Jay on that. Don't ask me to rationalise it, but I feel it quite strongly. My grandchild is the most precious gift, but had my daughter decided to become a man and medically transition, would I have wanted her to have kids anyway? Hell no. We are seeing an increasing number of women who claim they're not women, but men, getting pregnant and giving birth anyway, and claiming that giving birth is something a man can do. We are seeing men who ostensibly reject manhood posing as mothers. The long-term effect this LARPing has on their children is as yet unknown. Maybe they'll all turn out just fine, but at the end of the day, the cultists who say men can have babies because a man isn't a sex, it's a gender, are reinforcing regressive patriarchal stereotypes and doing nothing to undermine the system that exploits and oppresses women on the basis of our sex. Of course, the cultists took Kellie-Jay's comment and ran with it. When they talked about it, they would insert the word forcibly before the word sterilised, just to reinforce the point that Kellie-Jay is some kind of, I don't know, fanatical Nazi genocidal maniac. It was a matter of hours, or certainly within 24 hours, that Kellie-Jay withdrew the comment. I didn't see her do so on Twitter. Maybe she did, maybe she didn't. But she definitely did on Mumsnet. She's since been banned from Mumsnet, so unfortunately, I assume her comment no longer exists. But I remember she said words to the effect that when she had posted the offending tweet, she wasn't thinking about the possibility of those women who've medically transitioned changing their minds and detransitioning and going back to being normal women again. So she was sticking to her guns in her view that trans-identifying women should not have children while they are LARPing as men, but if they detransition, that's okay, and I agree with her on that. Unfortunately, this was one of the occasions she handed her enemies a stick to beat her with, and how unsurprising that they still resort to using it. Next. Okay, now Shaun talks about what happened at the Standing for Women event organised by Kellie-Jay and her team at Brighton. But before I show any of that, I'm just going to skip ahead a little bit to when he says this.
And she herself has a history of making racist statements that again is controversial even within the gender-critical movement. Some gender-critical people refused to associate with her, and the group Women's Place UK put out a statement explaining why they were cutting all links with Parker, saying, quote, "Women's liberation cannot be won by aligning with reactionary or oppressive groups or individuals who would deny women our rights and increase division and injustice."
Does Kellie-Jay hate or discriminate against anyone simply because they are black or brown or Muslim or whatever? Oh, and before anyone protests that Islam isn't a race, it's a religion and there are Muslims of all races, forget it. Race is a social construct as a way of dividing people of different heritages. And when you show contempt for someone purely on the grounds of their religion or their culture, then that is no different from hating on someone just because they've got a dark skin. I think we need to bite the bullet on this one rather than deflect by saying, oh, Islam isn't a race. So does Kellie-Jay hate or discriminate against anyone simply because they're black or brown or Muslim or Jewish or anything else? And does she support anyone else doing so? I've seen no evidence of that. Has she criticised certain Islamic cultural practices that she perceives put women and girls at a disadvantage compared to men? Yes, she has, as have I. The thing is, Kellie-Jay is always on the side of women and children. Any animosity Kellie-Jay expresses towards any culture is because of her perception of how that culture treats women and girls. Does she have any right to express anger about misogyny in other cultures? Well, yes, it's not a crime, but there are pitfalls in doing so, as I know from experience. One such pitfall is that those who care less about misogyny in other cultures, and that would seem to be the entire gender cult, will use it against us. But then, as a movement primarily concerned with promoting men's rights to colonize womanhood, they will use anything they can get their hands on against us. If criticizing cultural practices because they are rooted in misogyny makes her a racist, then she's in a no-win situation, which is exactly what her detractors want. This was one of the tweets that caused Women's Place UK to cancel her from speaking at a meeting they had organised in Cornwall at the request of local women back in the spring of 2018, which was just before she posted that terrible tweet about sterilising women who claim to be men. WP UK collected a few of her tweets, and I'm going to show you them, but sorry, I'm not going to read them out. I completely agree with this first one. I don't agree with forcing children to wear hijab because of some effed up idea about women's modesty and honour or whatever it is. The others cross a line and that they generalise about Muslim men. It's an easy line to cross when there have been so many horror stories, but I hope I don't need to explain why it is problematic to generalise in that way. But I will raise the question of whether it's fair to call someone a racist when their objection is only to the men of a particular culture and is inspired by concern for women of that same culture. That's a question I'd like to see addressed by Women's Place UK. They all seem to come from a similar background as socialist feminists and active trade unionists as I do, and I understand them wanting to protect their reputation. Goodness knows they were getting so much unjustified hate and being called a hate group against trans-identifying people for no good reason. Heavens above, they even platform trans-identifying men. I don't think cancelling Kellie-Jay ultimately made any difference to their reputation, though it certainly hurt Kellie-Jay, and given that her views arise from her concern for women and girls, it would have been better, in my opinion, to let her speak and to challenge her on her views at the meeting. And who knows, maybe a constructive dialogue could have taken place and we wouldn't be in this awful place of division and acrimony that we are in now. That's my opinion on that. Right, so Brighton. On Sunday, 18th September 2022, Kellie-Jay organised one of her open mic Standing for Women events at a park in Brighton, using the exact same format as all the other events she's organised in different towns around the country. And just as with all the other events, apart from the ones in London, trans activist bullies showed up and screamed and shouted. I made a video showing my own experience of that event and of being bullied by those nutters. I did not talk in that video of the presence of any far-right people at that event because I didn't know about them, I didn't see them, I didn't hear them. I had no idea they were there. I heard later that a young red-haired woman who spoke, who I now know to be Sophie Corcoran, is one of them, one of the supposed far right, but you wouldn't have known it from anything she said. If she had stood there and sounded off about immigrants or some other far right obsession, she wouldn't have lasted a minute with that particular audience. So, as I understand it, these right-wing people are associated with an obscure group called Hearts of Oak, who turned up and filmed the speeches, or some of them, on a mobile phone, as did a lot of other people. I didn't know about them, and frankly, I don't care. Why would I? When I speak in public, it's because I want to be heard. If I only wanted some people to hear me, then I wouldn't speak in public. Anyway, I found this group, Hearts of Oak, on YouTube. It seems they were only launched a couple of years ago as what they call a populist free speech organisation. They look like a bunch of wankers, and in their introductory video showing their launch meeting, they feature a few of the usual suspects like Carl Benjamin, Catherine Blakelock, Tommy Robinson, and Pastor Wale Babatunde. What?
Pastor Wale Babatunde spoke on preserving our heritage and culture.
Yes, you heard that correctly. I've never heard of him either, but having seen him and then noticing the hashtag Black and White Unite below the video, I was less surprised to see this guy speak at one of their meetings.
So good to be here today.
The Reverend George Hargreaves, who some of you may know back in the 1980s committed the barbarous sin of writing a hit disco anthem sung by Sanita called So Macho. If that wasn't bad enough, he went on to found the right-wing Christian Party in 2004. So my understanding is that a few people associated with this group turned up to a public event in a park attended by a few hundred other people, and to my knowledge, they did nothing and they said nothing to hurt anyone. Meanwhile, dozens of gender cultists turned up. They screamed, they shouted, they abused us, they bullied us, they threw tomatoes, they let off smoke bombs.
J.K. Rowling chose to weigh in by using her platform to condemn the protesters at the event. Not the far-right presence inside the event, but the people who were there to protest the event.
Here's the tweet which says, I see the Be Kind Brigade are once more hiding behind their black masks, throwing smoke bombs, screaming scum at women speaking up for their sex-based rights, and howling abuse at lesbians for not doing dick. Notably, Shaun shows the tweet but not the pictures accompanying it, which don't make the cultists look too good, and most significantly, he doesn't show the time and the date. JK tweeted this while the event was still going on, before most people were aware of the few far-right people who turned up and were hardly a presence. There is no reason to suppose JK knew about them, but even if she had, what was there to condemn when they didn't do anything except film? Shaun, like everyone else who banged on about the handful of supposed far-rightists while ignoring the protesters who abused us and tried to drown out our voices all afternoon and who actually behaved like fascists, is a sanctimonious hypocrite.
Rowling's language is also offensive and absurd and incorrect.
Offensive? Oh, you poor little snowflake, perhaps you'd like to swap places with us and see what language we have to put up with. There was nothing absurd and incorrect about it, though.
The protesters were howling at lesbians for not doing dick, apparently. She also explains in the replies to her tweet that, quote, women unafraid and unashamed of saying that they love only women are the greatest affront to patriarchy. But J.K. Rowling seems to be a bit confused here to be charitable.
No, she wasn't confused. You're just pig ignorant if you don't know that lesbians make up a large proportion of those attending any feminist fight back event. There were loads at Brighton, loads of gay men too, so what's your point?
This was not a lesbian event. The organiser, Posie Parker, is married to a man. Speaker Maya Forstater is married to a man. Speaker Helen Joyce is married to a man.
Yeah, so am I. Again, what's your point? JK did not claim it was a lesbian event. She was taking issue with the lesbophobia in the gender cult. Have you got anything to say about that, Shaun? He's coming across as really thick now, isn't he? People who should know better asked if Kellie-Jay invited this group. Why would she invite them? What purpose would that serve? It was a public open-air meeting in a public park in a busy town with very easy access from London and the southeast. Kellie-Jay made it clear that anyone who opposes gender ideology was welcome and that the purpose and the priority was to let women speak about anything concerning women. If that is what she wanted to happen, and that is indeed what did happen, why would she care if some undesirables turned up to listen? How does it make her, or any of us who spoke, an ally of them, any more than it makes us an ally of anyone else who turned up to have a look and a listen? That's what I find most bizarre, this notion that because some people turn up, she, or we, must think the same as they do. The fact that she refuses to condemn their presence or say they're not welcome is seen as courting them, even rolling out a red carpet for them. It's stupid, it's nasty, and it's thoroughly dishonest. Also, if these people are genuinely as bad as that, if they really are fascist thugs, I can think of no better way of ensuring they turn up in numbers and hostility than to say they're not welcome in a public space. Is that what we want? The last thing I want to say on this bit is that I agree with Women's Place UK that women's liberation cannot be won by aligning with reactionary or oppressive groups or individuals who would deny women our rights and increase division and injustice. No, of course it won't. But no such aligning is taking place except in the imaginations of those who seem determined to put the worst possible spin on anything she does. I was somewhat appalled when I learnt that she'd been interviewed by Carl Benjamin, but then I watched the interview and she was great. And as he had about 250,000 subscribers at the time, I can't criticise her for agreeing to do it. Amongst those subscribers will be parents of children being taught nonsense about gender in our schools and maybe inspired to keep a closer watch on what their children are being taught and to do something about it. How is that a bad thing? By the same token,
she's appeared on Tucker Carlson.
Yes, she appeared on Tucker Carlson's hugely popular show. Isn't that amazing? Whatever you might think of Carlson, I know he's very conservative and has got some bloody awful views, but while the cultists are desperately trying to silence Kellie-Jay, he gave her a platform. He let her speak to millions of ordinary Americans. He does the same for the brilliant left-wing American feminist Kara Dansky. He did the same for Julia Beck. Anyone who is the victim of a campaign of bullying and of trying to silence them, who turns down the opportunity to use Tucker Carlson's show to get their message out, is an idiot as far as I'm concerned.
Another person upset about the far-right infiltration of the gender-critical movement is Angela Wild, member of the group Get the L Out, who viewers of my other videos will definitely remember. This is her alongside Rowling at a much publicised lunch in a photograph featuring many of the other prominent figures of the UK's anti-trans movement.
I'll deal with the far-right infiltration allegation in a moment. First, I'd like to note that in a video supposedly about J.K. Rowling's new friends, I would expect these to be the women Shaun really focuses on, but he says very little about any of them. His primary focus has been on two women who are not there and who, so far as I know, never met her, one of whom is dead.
Wild recently stated on Twitter, "I'm horrified. We seem to have handed over our movement to people who go around preaching racist and misogynistic hatred. There was a time it was shameful to be a racist. Nowadays we can't even name racism anymore, let alone denounce racist infiltration."
Yes, I was very surprised that Angela said this a few days after Brighton because she's always struck me as quite a rational person. We seem to have handed over our movement to people who go around preaching racist and misogynistic hatred. What? No, we haven't. A few right-wingers turned up to a public open-air meeting in a park, that's all. As for supposed far-right or racist infiltration, I mean, if you're going to make that claim, you need to provide evidence. How could that even happen? The broad cross-section of people challenging gender ideology do not amount to a membership organisation, but name any far-right racist who is in any way influential, whether through their writing or speaking or being on the steering committee of any group that is fighting gender ideology, in any group of radical feminists, socialist feminists, women's rights activists, the Lesbian Alliance, the Gay Men's Network or the LGB Alliance. I don't know of anyone. Give me names. I don't doubt that white nationalists, or wherever they are, agree that men can't be women and children shouldn't be given puberty blockers and wrong-sex hormones, but that's not a far-right position. The first is a biological truth, coupled with a refusal to go along with a scientifically unsupportable ideological position, and the second is a question of ethics. Most of us who've been fighting on this issue in the UK for the past several years are politically on the left or leftish. The fact that the left has left us and we won't be voting Labour or Lib Dem or Green while they kowtow to this gender nonsense doesn't mean that I want to see the dismantling of the welfare state and the privatisation of our National Health Service and refusing to help refugees.
It's one thing about being called far-right by the TRAs, that's what she calls trans rights activists, and laugh it off, because frankly I'd rather cut both my legs off, I guess, than accept Heritage Foundation money, an alliance with Matt Walsh, or proclaim proudly that on the issues, Trump is my man.
Unfortunately, Angela sees fit to repeat the lie that Kellie-Jay has accepted money from the Heritage Foundation. Again, I'm not accusing Angela of deliberately lying here. I presume she's saying it because she believes it. But why does she believe it? Where is the evidence for this? There isn't any. The Heritage Foundation haven't said that they've given her money. Why would they give her money? And Kellie-Jay has denied receiving any, and as Kellie-Jay hasn't been afraid to be publicly associated with Conservatives when it suits her purpose, I see no reason to disbelieve her. It's not as if we're seeing her promoting the Heritage Foundation or any of their anti-women policies, but what the Heritage Foundation did do that nobody on the American so-called left would do is provide a platform to 4 Americans who've been badly hurt by gender ideology, including lesbian feminist Julia Beck. Again, allowing their message to reach ordinary Americans, which the gender loons have been so desperate to silence. What is this supposed alliance with Matt Walsh, by the way? Have I missed something? The one point with which I have some sympathy with Angela's view is Kellie-Jay famously saying Trump is her man on the issues she cares about. She did not proclaim it proudly, however. It was a simple observation, and again, she hands her enemies a rod to beat her with, or a gas lamp to gaslight her with. Trump is vile, but he's a conservative. He's not a far-right fascist, though some of his supporters appear to be. Feminists in the US seem to be in the same position as we are in the UK, cast into the political wilderness as the left, liberal, Green parties prioritise men's rights and abusive medical practices on children over women's rights and children's well-being, whereas the Republicans, like our Tories, come across as motivated by greed, selfishness and lack of care for the disadvantaged. We're in a no-win situation.
But when the far right speaks at gender-critical events unchallenged, we have no leg to stand on to tell them that's not true, because hey, it is true. Well, not in my name.
No, it isn't true. There has been no far-right rhetoric spoken at any Standing for Women event. I don't understand why Angela said this. I would hope that she has now deleted that tweet, but when I looked, it seems she has protected her tweets. I note she got a lot of pushback, for example, from the brilliant La Scapigliata, if I pronounce that right. Posie and others have repeatedly invited women who picket these events on the TRA side to take the mic and say their piece. They never accept, but they are invited to do so. So many black and lesbian women at Standing for Women events testify that Posie is neither a racist nor a homophobe. I know that to be absolutely true. I would have nothing to do with her if it were. And she gets back up from my friend Belle Staffy, who is a lesbian and who confirms that KJ isn't homophobic. You know what? I am totally bored with Shaun. He's a nasty, hateful little man, and he chose an incredibly silly way to try to smear J.K. Rowling. ultimately he's done her no harm, and he's done none of the women who had lunch with her any harm, and he's probably done Kellie-Jay no more harm than those on the same side of her in this fight have done. So, for those who appreciate her, please support her however you can. That's all. Thanks for watching.